Okay, since this is a vlogging camera, might as well let's shoot a vlog. Hey guys, so welcome back to Tech 360, and today we have yet another camera review, but this time around it's a Sony compact camera. This is called the ZV1F, not to be confused with the ZV1 or ZV-10. This is essentially Sony's take on the perfect vlogging camera, and they claim themselves that the ZV1 is a best all-rounder, and this one is highly made for vlogging. Part of the essential features that make it a vlogging camera is the fact that the second you flip out the screen, it automatically turns on. In a lot of ways that will help in terms of efficiency, getting yourself in that mode of getting your camera and flipping out the screen instead of finding the on button. It will automatically turn on for you, and all that's left is to hit record. It's also very, very light. It's made out of recycled plastics. So yes, at first glance, once you pick this up, it will feel like it's slightly cheap, but I think Sony is making more of that step into sustainability, and also it's a smart move, especially when you are planning to use this as a vlogging camera, holding this up for long periods. Yeah, there's a huge appeal for making a light camera, but yet usable. You still get the tally light in front when you press record, and also the illuminating lights around the border of the screen, just like how you get on all the other new Sony cameras. And yeah, the tally light in front as well illuminates. I personally think that Sony have been dissecting more and more into that video aspect of cameras, and just mainly because of the higher demand in the market asking for more video features. And needless to say, this is part of those endeavors, and another aspect to why this is a perfect vlogging camera is the fact that it comes with a fixed lens. It's a f2 20mm lens. It's not interchangeable like the ZV-10, but I'm guessing like this is the best focal length when you have your arm out kind of type of situation. And most of the footages I took in the early beginning of this video, yeah, it really helped in removing one extra step, which is finding different focal lengths. Or in situations when I'm driving, this does still have a 4x zoom, a digital zoom, but I'm not much of a digital zoom type of person. But this is not meant for professionals in the first place. It's meant for consumers or people who are not really experienced using cameras in the first place. And in essence, when you pair this up with Sony's Bluetooth grip, and also the compact ECM G1. I recently made a review on the ECM G1, so do check that out. And I've always thought that microphone would be perfect for this situation, but this still does come with onboard mics. But as a point of reference, using the 3 omnidirectional mics on board, how does it sound like? But where things fall short when it comes to having a fixed lens, it loses out on OIS. So there is Sony's steady shot, but in situations when you're walking, I would say that's completely fine. But any further than that, I'd say it will get kind of that warping effect, and it also adds a bit of that crop. So it depends. Maybe just switch it off. Autofocus features also now come with real-time eye autofocus. I don't think so that was available in the ZV1. But I do have to make a point that the ZV1 came with hybrid autofocus. This comes with contrast autofocus. And from my experience with most Panasonic cameras, I'm currently shooting off a Panasonic camera, and usually I really have quite a lot of issues when it comes to autofocus on Lumix cameras. Contrast autofocus is great when there's sufficient lighting, but in low light scenarios, contrast autofocus just does not work as well. But just to give you a bit of context, it does come with 425 points of contrast autofocus. So yes, most of my shots here, at least for Sony cameras with that contrast autofocus, it does work, but again, sometimes it does get confused whether if it's pure highlights. It gets confused, basically. It gets confused with shadows and highlights sometimes. But in this case, it does manage to keep most subjects in focus, and also to mention a few that was first introduced in the ZV-E10 is product showcase. But by enabling this, it'll be best suited in a fixed environment with a controlled lighting source like I have here in the studio, because as soon as you crank up the aperture, then you might just lose out on that depth of field. Conveniently though, it does come with a bokeh switch or background defocus to separate yourself or subjects, and it's best to use this feature when you're shooting in auto intelligent mode and not in manual exposure. Ultimately, I believe this camera was made to streamline your vlogging process, so you wouldn't have to dial in shutter, ISO settings or apertures. But I just believe like this bokeh switch is more user-friendly for less experienced users who want to get the most out of a camera without taking too much control in image quality. Speaking of images, our other producer in Singapore had this to say about this camera's performance on its still or photo capture.
Hey guys, so I also had the opportunity to try the ZV1F here in Singapore, and I have to say that it's a pretty decent experience. Now here I am in the studio, just holding a camera handheld without a grip and with a Rode Video Micro attached for the microphone. So as you can tell, image quality and everything is pretty decent, and this is kind of the quality you can expect from a run and gun style. But anyways, enough about the video quality. I'll leave that to Fitri because he's going to touch on more about that. But for now, let's talk about photos. The ZV1F is kind of like a trimmed down RX100 series in my opinion, featuring that same 1-inch sensor except with a fixed lens. So in that regard, it's perhaps more apt to kind of compare it to the Ricoh GR series. So you can expect that same kind of photography when it comes to this camera, which means it's great for street, it's good for speed, and kind of keeping it discreet. With this 1-inch sensor at 20 megapixels, you'll capture a good amount of detail that's going to do fine with medium to large prints, especially when it comes to wide shots of the environment, urban, landscape, you name it. And there's still quite a bit of texture and detail remaining even after you crop it. But the true strength of this camera really shows when you go up close, and especially for portraits. Not only are you going to get that much more vivid detail, but this is also where the f2 aperture plays a huge role, giving you that natural bokeh fall off that just looks much more pleasing to the eye as compared to a smartphone. As expected, however, it does fall short when it comes to night shots, especially at high ISO, with quite a bit of noise and grain. And colors aren't the most poppy straight off the camera. Editing with the RAW is definitely recommended. Overall though, it's a pretty great experience, and I would say that given its compact nature, it's going to be great for travel as well, or even part of your EDC. Back to Fitri.
As for ISO, it has a base ISO of 125 and it will range up all the way to 12,800. In terms of how image quality works well or not in terms of dynamic range for S-Log2 or S-Log3, that's still dependent on how I see this on the big picture. So let's get into the image quality comments right now. Let's get into that right now. Okay, so just to make a few comments on the ISO and also S-Log2 and S-Log3 modes. I would say that in standard picture profiles itself, you do retain quite a lot of colors, and shadows are not so bad, especially if you're shooting above 400 ISO. It doesn't cause too much noise. But the second it's shot in S-Log2, you do retain quite a lot more of that high dynamic range, which is what the color profile was made to be. S-Log2 gives you more of that dynamic range, and in this case with the ZV1F, yeah, it does get kind of muted once you've had a LUT placed on top of it. In this case, I would say colors are a bit washed out, but you can always just crank that up using a vibrant edition here on Premiere Pro. For S-Log3, I would say in some occasions it does better, and Sony is notorious for having a better image quality in S-Log3. I've heard a lot of users not liking too much in S-Log2, but I personally use S-Log2 more. Mostly because it's much easier to grade. And if you have a correct LUT, then in most cases, S-Log2 would be the best option for you. But in this scenario right now, the two images that I'm using as a comparison, in this case, S-Log3 does look much better. The second example, this is shot in standard, and you get the correct amount of highlights, but I would say it's a bit overexposed. S-Log2 does better, but yeah, S-Log3, I think this was already shooting above 4000 ISO. It was getting quite dark, so I had to push the ISO quite high, and yeah, it got really noisy. And yeah, if you can see from this example here, a lot of noise and a lot of grain too. If you want to shoot in S-Log2, S-Log3, completely possible, especially with an f2 aperture on that fixed lens. But I suggest just shooting in standard because it's a vlogging camera anyways. In broad daylight, sufficient lighting, then yeah, if you want to play around with a bit more colors, then yeah, S-Log2 or S-Log3 would be great. But in terms of ISO, it's a small sensor, so don't expect much out of it. Oddly though, I don't know why they had the 1/4 inch thread mount placed so far on the left side of the bottom part of the camera. I'm assuming it's supposed to give you a direct line of sight to the lens when you're holding this with the mini tripod or wireless stand that the Sony ones come with, and that will be very suitable for people that is right-handed. I wouldn't say so much on left-handed because it just feels awkward now just holding it in a different way. So yeah, I don't really know why Sony came up with this sort of mounting position. Maybe there's some internals here blocking the way, but still, I don't understand why. Other points that I'd like to take a fun jab at is, can this camera be rigged or be a good B cam? And the obvious answer to that is yes. Since it comes with a mini HDMI 3.5mm jack, in some way, yeah, you can rig this up. Adding a shotgun mic or even a battery pack to power up using the USB-C, then yeah, possibly this can be rigged up, but I doubt that any professionals end up using this as a professional camera in the first place. So what do I think about the ZV1F? I think it's the perfect vlogging camera. And Sony has done what they intended to do, which is made the perfect vlogging camera. But you do lose out on extending this or using this as something else, like most cameras are made to do, like an interchangeable lens. That's more of what cameras are made to be. Like, you can expand it to something else. The fact that this comes with a fixed lens, I think the ZV-E10 would be a better choice if you tend to play around with cameras more, because in a way, like, most phone cameras are shooting 4K, some are shooting 6K, and if you're planning to vlog anyways, then I suggest just use your phone. Like the 14 Pro comes with a 48 megapixel camera, and this is a 20.1 megapixel CMOS sensor. So in a lot of ways, phone cameras are vlogging material already, so this kind of puts it in a very specific niche place. But then again, it's only 2,699 ringgit. A new iPhone will cost you 5,000 plus. So yeah, depends. Do you want a specific camera for vlogging? Then yeah, this will be the perfect camera. If not, I suggest to just shoot with your phone. But yeah, if you have any questions about this camera, do let me know in the comment section down below, and leave a like and subscribe and all that stuff. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.